Hello, my name's James Aldridge. I'm an artist working with people and places, and I've been invited to record this short talk for you by Engage. I'm going to jump straight into sharing my screen and showing some images because I'm going to try and keep this brief, so around 10 to 15 minutes. But also at the end, I'm going to share a few online resources so that if you want to follow it up and find out a little bit more, you can. Okay, so let's get started. Okay, so I've been working on a research project called Queer River for the last 3 years. And today what I wanted to talk about is the relationship between my Queer River research and a project called The Ripple Effect that I worked on with Leigh Chalmers from Wessex Archaeology and the Environment Agency. So why Queer River? Queer River I set up basically because I'm fascinated by all things river related and because the Earth crisis is having and will have an enormous impact on the water cycle and on the health and on the behavior of our rivers. But also because I'm very interested in those voices that are excluded often from conversations around the climate and biodiversity crisis in terms of climate justice and just in terms of coming to understand how we each experience and perceive the rest of what we've come to call nature. So about 3 years ago, I set up the website for Queer River. As you can see, that's queerriver.com. I started researching queer ecology in relationship to wetlands and looking at LGBTQI plus people's experiences of wetlands as well. And now this has evolved over time, deliberately so. I didn't want to have a research project that had a sort of conceived ending. And the methodology of that project, what it has looked like is basically walking and talking and making with other people along rivers and alongside and with other wetlands. So the people have been varied. I've just done some screen captures here from some of the kind of case studies, if you like, from my website, so you can see what that looks like. And this is from a walk with a botanist called Mark. Also walked with river restoration ecologists, people researching the relationship between art and well-being, writers, all sorts of different people, and they're all recorded on the Queer River website. And then what happens is that then informs my own understanding of rivers and what they need from us in the future, and I document that through my own arts practice. So it's basically different people coming together that have different perspectives on and experiences of rivers and seeing how those perspectives intersect and what we can learn from each other. So again, it's about looking at diversity of experience rather than there being one sort of truth, if you like, rather than taking our understanding of what rivers are and what they need from us from what we've inherited from our society or our culture as a whole. It's about saying, let's take a diverse range of viewpoints and experiences and learn from those as a whole and how they come together. So as an example, this walk with Mark Spencer, took place along the estuary of the River Thames. And myself and Mark were walking and talking. I was making marks onto photographs that I printed out, but also onto plain paper. I was collecting different things, mapping the walk in different ways, really. And as we walked and talked, Mark shared with me his understanding of the river from a botanist's perspective. But also Mark was active in AIDS activism in the past as well, and was a contemporary of Derek Jarman. And as we walked, we talked about the relationship between climate activism and AIDS activism. And so you can start to see how these walks basically inform my understanding. And hopefully, as a dialogue, it's a two-way process as well. So, for instance, Mark was talking to me about how, as sea levels rise, rivers are becoming increasingly salty. So because of the increased amount of salt water coming into the Thames, the movement of seaweed up the Thames is increasing, but also things like the sort of waste dumps and the landfills that are along the southeast coast of England, which will be inundated as the sea levels rise. So each person brings different perspectives, brings different experiences, and I learn from those. Hopefully they learn from me. I share my own practice and my own understanding with them. And that creates this sort of meandering path of research from one walk to the next. Also, as well as walking with, if you like, external streams and wetlands and rivers, I'm also interested in the sort of inner flows, the way that water and other liquids flow within our body, how we've come to name parts of our anatomy after sort of watery features of the external world, if you like, and the relationship between the inside and the outside. So when I'm talking about Queer River, I'm talking about queering our sense of what a river is, as well as looking at LGBTQI plus people's experiences. So it's blurring the boundaries between water inside and outside of our bodies. It's blurring the boundaries between the water and the land. So for instance, going for a walk to, in theory, find the source of the River Avon, and I live near the Hampshire Avon, where it begins in Wiltshire. And then, of course, finding that there isn't a source. We talk about sources of rivers, but there is no beginning and there is no end, because the rain falls from the sky. Here, at least, it soaks down through the chalk downland. It goes into aquifers, and when the water table is high enough, it appears above the ground in different places. So we like to pin things down, don't we? We like to fix things, whether that's physically fixing and straightening a river and canalizing a river, or whether on a map it's fixing a point of where a river starts and where it ends. But through walking with the river, through paying attention to it and listening to it, we can come to understand it differently. And that's what Queer River is all about. And at one point, I discovered I had kidney stones. And these kind of blockages to the flow of liquid through my body seemed to be very relevant to me when I was looking at things like damming and canalization and beavers and all sorts of interruptions to flows, and whether they were seen as positive or negative by people. I was then suddenly in a hospital waiting room, Googling kidney stones and finding out the patron saint of kidney stones was potentially a queer abbot that lived in an abbey next to a river. And there are all sorts of possibilities then for further research. So this is what happens. Like I say, it's a flowing, undulating path of research. And at each point where I meet other people or I carry out further research individually, it sparks new thoughts and new ideas, which then get carried on to the next stage. And you can see some of the drawings here, some of the photographs I printed out and put into my website that are exploring the interrelationship of different watery flows within and outside of the body, and the relationship between pollution of rivers and sewage and bodily health and ill health. And that's something that's become a key part of my work and research as well, is blue health, the relationship between human health and the health of rivers and of being near and by rivers and other wetlands. So what does that actually look like in practice? So you can see here that this is when I did some work with the University of Glasgow called Queer River Wetland. And I was commissioned to make some work in Glasgow alongside and in the lead up to COP26. And I walked with a group of people, including Minty Donald, who's a performance practitioner and who works with the university, Rachel Clive, who's again a performance practitioner and also a researcher into the relationship between geodiversity and neurodiversity, and also with someone who's Cecilia Tortajada, who's works with big businesses and organizations looking at water resource management, and also with an archaeologist who is bringing her depth of understanding and knowledge around the history of the rivers Clyde and Kelvin within Glasgow. So we walked and talked and made together. We reflected on our experiences. Minty and I put together performance scripts that people could download from the Queer River website and use as inspiration to go out and carry out their own river walks. And also on the bottom right-hand side, you can see that this is a still from a talk that I gave as part of an online discussion event that we ran together. So it started out with that walk, and then you might think, well, where does this research go? What does it lead to? It has many outputs, whether it's writing, presenting, making and exhibiting. And on the bottom left-hand corner, you can see some work that I was doing in my studio with my dog, who's also called River, laying on the drawing. Sorry, just briefly going back to that. Yeah, I also mentioned work around blue health. So I've also worked with Bristol University over the last year or so, working with some medical students, exploring the relationship between wetlands and health and well-being. I appreciate some of this is short and condensed, but I'm just trying to give you a flavour of how the different elements connect. So I said, where does this go? You know, I exhibit some of the work. I make drawings out of inks that I've created from the plants that grow alongside my local river. I've done a lot of research into chalk streams. And on the bottom right-hand side, you can see a film that I made called Chalk in the Blood, playing at Pound Arts in Wiltshire, which is where I had a solo exhibition earlier last year now. Also showed some work at the Museum of English Rural Life in Reading, and was commissioned to make and show some work at Yarmouth Springs Eternal in Great Yarmouth. So again, examples of where this goes. To me, it's a constant process of, like I said, walking and talking and making with others, and then more individual reflection through making as well, and then sharing that through exhibition. So the ripple effect, what relationship does the ripple effect have to all this? The ripple effect was a 2-year art and wellbeing project, which was devised by Leigh Chalmers from Wessex Archaeology with myself, and we took a proposal to the Environment Agency. And the Environment Agency have been working with other partners in Salisbury to change the shape and the look and the feel of the river corridor through the city for a range of reasons, including flood mitigation, but also increasing biodiversity and increasing access to the river for local people. So we felt, Leigh and I, that it made perfect sense to have some kind of community engagement project alongside this work that was taking place. So we spent 2 years working with a group of people who had identified as having some kind of mental health need. And we met regularly across those 2 years. Were given access by the Environment Agency to things like fish rescues, when fish were being taken out one channel to put into another so that the channel could be improved and they could come back later. Things like seeing water voles that are being relocated, all sorts of different things. Also working with Wiltshire Wildlife Trust water team, and also very much working with Wessex Archaeology's experts, so environmental archaeologists and so on, that could help us to explore what the river might have looked like and how people might have experienced it in the past. So alongside our experiences of the present, we're exploring using our senses and recording that using art, we can then start to think about, what does this river need from us in the future? What might it look like in the future? And what changes is climate breakdown going to bring? And these screen captures are from a piece that I wrote for Wessex Archaeology, which is on their website. We also had an exhibition locally in Salisbury, and a brilliant filmmaker that works for Wessex called Tom Westhead created a film which can be seen on the Wessex Archaeology YouTube channel. So if you Google the ripple effect, Wessex Archaeology and YouTube, or just look on their YouTube channel, it's up there. And it's a beautiful film. I can say that because I didn't make it, but obviously my perspectives are included within it. I talk a little bit, but it's very much about the voice of the participants and what they feel they've gained from it. You can see a photo of Leigh installing some of the work on the top right, and a little taste of some of the work within the exhibition on the left. So it's very much documentation of the process of coming to know the river through art, through archaeology, and through ecological understanding as well, interacting with the support of Wiltshire Wildlife Trust. So I'm conscious of the fact I need to be finishing soon. There's so much to talk about. There's so much potential in this kind of work. What's happening for me next? I'm going to continue Queer River. I'm going to carry out a residency with the Groundwork Gallery in Kings Lynn in Norfolk later this year, which is really exciting, exploring some of the rivers in Kings Lynn, exploring potential flooding in the future, and also the health of these rivers, because several of the key rivers in that area are chalk streams. So there's that direct relationship with my rivers locally to me here and those rivers in Norfolk. I'm also starting a residency next month with an organisation called Spud in the New Forest, and that residency is called Neuroqueering Nature, and it's bringing in a new strand of research that I've called Neuroqueer Ecologies, which is looking at the perspectives and the experiences of neurodivergent people. And in a similar way to looking at the experience of LGBTQI plus people, it's basically saying, how do we as neurodivergent people experience the world? What are our sensory differences, maybe our systemizing differences, maybe the impact that the trauma of unmet needs has had on the way that we perceive and relate to the rest of what we've come to call nature, and what can the rest of the world learn from that? And lastly, we've applied for funding with Found Outdoors, which is a small rewilding project in Wiltshire, to do some R&D work around, again, neurodivergence and rewilding. So basically looking at what are the benefits to mental health and well-being of interacting through art with a rewilding site. There's loads more to say about that. I will be sharing more on my website and my blog, and to just leave you with some other resources that you can follow up on. Normally, I would, in a talk, it would be a lot more interactive and responsive, but obviously because this is recorded, I'm sharing some resources that you can go away and try out. So Ebb and Flow was a project which took place before Queer River and before the Ripple Effect. A shorter project with Wessex Archaeology, where I went for a walk with a marine environmental archaeologist, a geoarchaeologist, sorry. And you can read about that, and you can see short films that I've made of suggested river-based activities that you can carry out to come to know and come to see your river, your local river, in different ways. Secondly, I mentioned the Ripple Effect film. Queer River Wetland, the performance score that you can download and use to respond to your own local river, and the recording of the online discussion event where different people came and shared their perspectives around queer ecology and wetlands. That's on the Queer River website. And lastly, a piece that I wrote for the Climate Museum UK blog, Blue Health in a Time of Drought and Flood. So that touches on my work with Bristol University, and it starts to think about, okay, we can talk about blue health in terms of the benefits of being alongside and in or on water. What about the impact of the effects that we're seeing now and that are to come from climate breakdown? A quick whiz through, but I hope something within that has grabbed your imagination and you'd like to find out more. Please feel free to contact me as well through the Queer River website, or tag me on social media, and I'm happy to answer any questions. So on social media, I'm at James Aldridge Art. Brilliant. Thanks very much, and take care. Bye-bye.